Hello gamers and gamettes, we're talking about perfect sequels once again, this time with Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. Yes, both of them. Truly one of the single most overhyped video games in history, but for good reason. Here we're taking a deep dive into probably the greatest example of a sequel done right in all of gaming, to see what really makes the game stick the landing so well. Yes, we're going through quite literally everything, meaning obvious spoilers ahead, as we gotta see how this certified cult classic managed to one-up everything the prior game was, somehow finding new thrilling ways to innovate an otherwise good formula while keeping the general game structure the same, all in an effort to see how peak the game is, and to see if the remaster even really needed to exist at all. So with timestamps being delivered and YouTube begging me to have you like and sub before even watching announced content, because it works apparently, we begin. In terms of world building, this game aims for a much more unique Mario locale. Yeah, we're not recycling content here, as the 2D plumber's new adventure takes him to a new world, with a drastically different vibe. Between the noose for public execution, depression just as a land, while even being able to shake up the execution for what would otherwise be lackluster area. The style here is charming, and the world has a much more definitive vision to it. But we're here for gameplay. With Rogueport and the surrounding areas, you have your more condensed hub area, with secrets to find as you unlock more abilities, of course. An under hub area with a weird loop mirrored kind of, but not really layout with easily accessible fast travel pipes. Then of course our main 7 chapter areas alongside the final one, packed with enemies, blocks to get head trauma on, hazards, tame platforming shenanigans, and of course obstacles for Mario and his partners to handle. This time featuring newly playable background sections. The world itself is mostly good, especially with character design and personality among NPCs, buildings, and such, all packed into the game's book-centered structure, distributed through its chapter-based segments, all unique from one another, while Mario gathers the 7 plot devices to save Princess Peach. The game still isn't complex, and it's for the better. In terms of sequeling the game, Mario's ability to go through the world has been brought up quite a bit, as before he had his jump and an unlockable hammer, he just has both by default now, each with 2 unlockable upgrades needed to progress the game once again. The super boots still owned by still popping over those hidden panels, obviously hiding secrets. It still hit switches, of course, alongside other interactions. We have new Ultra Boots this time, now giving you crazy height, serving a much more different role as an add-on. Meanwhile, the hammer upgrades both sadly feel half-baked, both being a charge up and release thing to break blocks and hit enemies. The only difference with the upgrades, of course, still being the blocks that the 2 will break. Well, now on top of these upgrades granting free damage, they now additionally even grant new unique attacks in battle. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Mario gets actual new abilities that, get this, use the series identity of paper tastefully for traversal. While no battling benefits exist, you get 4 new abilities over the course of the game, where Mario gets to fold around and access new areas by flying over the world, sliding between gaps, rolling around as a tube, or the peak that is being the boat. 2 of which being useful navigation tools, meanwhile playing in the boat sadly kind of just fumble because you do need an activation panel to use them, meaning no sick tech lays around specifically for playing needs. Also, Mario just doesn't know how to spin anymore, so in this game he just gets to be slower courtesy of not having speed tech. Rounding out the GameCube version's overworld gameplay, it's the partners. Like the original game, the partners are still a big deal in terms of navigating the world. Unfortunately, this game's new roster retreads a lot of old ideas, like the Goomba reskin whose optional power tells you about the world and lets you find your new favorite character, like the Koopa who hits and grabs stuff from a distance, now able to be held in place, your gap crossing tool now coming baked in with faster movement so you can forgive the cutting of the spin, a bomb that explodes. Ooh, who could have seen that one coming? But this time, Mario puts his back into it. Otherwise, we get the transparency ability, but reskinned. Meanwhile, that only leaves us with 2 new concepts, starting with blowing, being a unique tool for exposing hidden spots and stunning enemies, which the latter absolutely gets underutilized. Meanwhile, our new functioning concept just helps you find items or coins. They may be hidden or may not. It's completely optional. We got 7 partners, and their talents are a lot more condensed and multi-use, all of which are upsides, especially when they are used off an actual button this time. Seriously, why did 64 have us use it from the stick? I swear to God, it was the worst decision ever. In terms of running around, doing whatever, it's better. The game feels more tighter and more straightforward. Maybe a little too much with these corridor-based area designs. And as we'll totally see later, it's just kind of perfect. Yeah, that's funny, but sadly, we gotta go peek the remaster real quick because different. And that's the big selling point of it all, ain't it? The remaster, as you'd expect, doesn't change too much in the grand scheme of things. And to get started, we begin with terraforming the world, which grants us quite a bit of tidbits to help make life gooder. The additions of some random pipes and springs end up being complete game changers as far as replayability is concerned. That impact we're going to see later. Please allow me to edge you further. More completely game warping changes include new block rearrangements, additional save and healing blocks, alongside more hidden blocks and items rewarding you for just mashing A everywhere. Then there's the what even are these changes? We're just mentioning these because they're different and not the same. Something like the new Rock by Chapter 4's Black Key. The Riddle Tower doors will actually be locked until you use the Star Key, alongside the larger boot chest room and other minuscule non-points. But the main bulk here are the movement differences. Now, once again, are only minor changes, but geez, do they stand out when you've really played both versions of the game. For our gamers who play like IGN reviewers, needing their hand held at all times, we have a new partner hint system. A simple button press that'll give you dialogue either vaguely or directly telling you what to do next for story progression, ensuring you'll never get stuck unable to progress the game, or influence you to waste time more, who really knows. It is an upside though. Some minor sticker starring takes place with our new hammer, finally giving Mario permission to use it, but facing forward or backwards. Not really changing much at all. If the grass wasn't ruined, that is. Instead of just walking up to it and pressing A, now you've got to bunk grass with the hammer because I'm guessing sticker star makes sense considering the new A press for pipes. Although that game spoon feeds into our next change as an actual negative, as first strikes are a big thing to get, but more importantly avoid taking in the overworld for their gameplay edge. However, for some asinine reason, ranged foes connecting their first strikes doesn't start battle, but instead you just take the whole damage, which is just counterproductive to first strikes as a feature even existing in the first place, really distracting from the combat being the focal point in damage. Overworld damage was always an afterthought, but now, no blocking, no super guarding, just die. A big super duper revolutionary addition would be the partnering. Holding down the left bumper puts up a wheel on screen to swap partners at a much more tolerable speed, no longer opening menu nonsense. More sticker star inspiration approaching. A fall, in some instances, like a hazard or something, will cause Mario to stutter for a second before dropping, giving you some leeway in not taking damage or losing progress while still allowing for failure. Yep, the game is getting softer. But to finish out this homework section is more ledge interactions, particularly with the Yoshi. Why does he gotta lose all momentum when dropping from any height? Whereas the GameCube version didn't do so, we will truly never know. So we just gotta stick with the slowness. Anyways, cool, let's get on with the gameplay because this is where the video truly begins. The turn-based battling system in Paper Mario 64 was beautiful. It had sauce, although it was arguably a bit barren. But here, we get to one-up the ever-living hell out of the old system. Undoubtedly, the biggest change the game provides is the partner system. After all, Mario previously did all the heavy lifting, took all the relevant damage required for your game over. Without external means, he charged star power alone. Only he could run for his life, and only again, being the only one who could reach in his pockets for illegal contraband. But here, all these actions can now be performed by the partner, minus the game overing part, alongside the defend command just being a minor damage reducer replacing the old do nothing. But who cares about that? As just implied, your partners now have a proper HP system. Where they could previously get hit and be unusable for a few turns, it was so rare in distribution it was essentially locked to boss fights. But now it's just standard HP like Mario and the enemies, increasing through the old redone super and ultra ranking system. Defensive benefits for the partners exist, as swapping the turn order leaves your crew positioned where certain enemies or attacks can't reach them. For instance, the Chain Chomp attack or the Koopa's standard shell attack will only target the teammates sitting in the front. While Mario and most of his companions have no special properties, a few do. Koops has one defense but the drawback of being a flippable Koopa, meanwhile Flurry ends up being immune to ground shaking attacks. Adding extra perks to each of those partners that you'd hope to not have fall, because in the GameCube version at least, death will actually persist between battles, unless otherwise healed. These are how the partners are able to take center stage, and pull some weight of their own meat shield style, or just through their added options, like being able to partake in fetching star power, which also has had a massive overhaul, as your special moves are once again tied to the star gauge and expands as you collect the crystal stars throughout the game alongside earning new abilities, this time getting one as early as the prologue, where previously you only got star power from a single command and barely added any at the start of a turn. Here, however, blown out of the water. The appeal command does basically the same thing for an instant burst of SP, but the big game changer comes on attacks. As sure, an attack with its proper action command will give you some SP to work with, but the introduction of stylishes changes changes everything, and in a lot of instances can just kill appealing as an option. These are essentially additional action commands with the sole purpose of milking more SP from your attacks, but the catch is the action commands are hidden for their timing unless otherwise made so, rewarding you with further SP for having more game knowledge on any non-item or non-special move. But since it's action commandy, surprise, we have more of these. Particularly, the special moves have them now, keeping these a bit entertaining while letting them excel when you excel. But the main action command thing we have of value here is the Super Guard, an alternative defensive action command that essentially requires you to forfeit your standard guard's A press with that of a B press for a much tighter timing window that lets you take no damage at all from attacks, and even damaging back most direct attacking enemies, just because it wasn't overpowered enough. Being able to pull it off consistently makes you actively unkillable, but leaving yourself prone to full damage and any potential status conditions where failed. The mechanic has two ways to be described: either hype beyond words or completely game breaking. It's high risk with outstanding reward, where the only attempt at balancing it is just a few attacks across the entire game being unblockable, with even more so being the case when you move to Japan. Also worth noting that action commands no longer need to be unlocked, now available from the very beginning. Speaking of unguardable attacks, items, but this time not for you, as now normal enemies can actually have and use items or badges at random if they generate with them, meaning no way more threats even when such foes should be far below your pay grade. Okay, seriously though, those dudes with stopwatches are trained assassins. Meaning finally the last overhaul would be the stage. Yes, the stage is an actual gameplay mechanic packed with interactions of its own, separated into 4 distinct sections. First, the stage itself is more than just a backdrop now, as hazards can randomly take place in the battle, like a prop or the ceiling just falling, stage nozzles activating, or even falling objects. Effects capable of influencing both sides of battle in various scenarios with something like fog, why, random statuses, and I think I'm forgetting something. My honest reaction. Now, our second stage slice of the cake is the audience, as these randomly selected PNGs in the crowd are the big tie to star power gain here, as each of the species of folk in the crowd are unique with how they operate and more importantly distribute SP. But the basics include a crowd member obviously taking one of the limited crowd seats, each coming with individual base SP given, and an ability to interact with you from throwing something either harmful or helpful right to you, the living target, with a small window of time to potentially protect yourself at the cost of that audience member, all alongside potential unique qualities on top for each individual character. Toads will notably give more SP than others, Dullbones giving nothing if you don't appeal, Shy Guys can forcibly trigger stage hazards, Bulky Bob-Ombs taking up 2 seats on top of being able to blow the crowd away, Luigi just simply not having duplicates just to scratch the surface. That's before reaching each character's item throwing pool, if they even can at all. I'm willing to go on record here and say the all boo audience is probably the best one, despite what consequences can come from it. Our third leg, of the stage system will be gambling, as every time you attack and the game doesn't end, you'll earn a card, or whatever these are supposed to be, with your second one resetting if they don't match. However, if they do, you'll have the opportunity to go for 3 after the next action with a simple timeable A press. Fumbling again does nothing, act surprised, but lining up the 3 for the bingo rewards you greatly, with a maxed out crowd and depending what's actually matched, with a full HP heal, a full FP refresh, capped SP, or potentially all at once. But it's not all good, as matching poison shrooms will definitely put you on the back foot by cutting into all those resources, making sure the game will be an uphill battle. Which finally brings us into that 4th member of this arms race, being the leveling system. While the system itself is mostly unchanged, still with more HP, FP, and DP as rewards, this time every battle ends with you getting a single star point even if foes are too low levels to drop any, with the exception being the final boss in the remaster, with a massively increased level cap and stat caps that you'll pretty much never reach. The new thing here, however, is the stage upgrades, as every 10 levels you'll unlock a new stage with new stage hazards and more seats to boot. The only issue is that you're not really unlocking the 4th stage by the time the game ends, but more on that later. All these 4 swords make up the surprisingly complex stage mechanics that affect damn near every battle in the game, finally allowing the star power system to flourish while adding a lot to the battling scene that isn't just a simple battle system, but a simple battle system with layers. And it feels like a wet dream to play through, all on top of what Paper Mario 64 was, and we still haven't even gotten to the nuances of the badge system, but better yet. But that'll have to wait because of the remaster differences. Among the egregious list of changes the remaster brings to the table, a lot is the same, but things are not the same obviously. Some action commands. For some reason, the guard has been altered a bit, as now we have new visual indicators when guarding and super guarding. Particularly they're useful in learning timings, but now things are less block as you get attacked and more block before you get attacked. Maybe I'm crazy because plenty of attacks had their guard timings altered and others with better tells as to when to block, but geez, does this feel far more generous than it should. Minor battling adjustments have also been made. Mystery and hammer throw getting buffed and nerfed respectively. Detonating bombs early involves them dropping 0 star points. The frost piranhas and the swoopulas getting a new attack each. Flower fuzzy AI only targeting Mario. Power lift will boost stats sooner. Partner badges properly working down the second Duples fight, which yeah, badges exist exclusively for partners now. This is also true for the original. Among other minuscule details to shove into some cobwebbed corner of your memory. Stage hazards hop in as well. Now, piercing defensive left unguarded, which is an issue because the fall speed alteration somehow makes it harder to block when the opposite is supposed to be true. Alongside something like fog now affecting half the stage, arguably making the game more soft than it needs to be. Numbers involving the generation of star power has been altered quite a bit, mainly to nerf the danger and peril bonuses, although it really doesn't feel that noticeable in gameplay. Well, in normal conditions that is. Only the dull bones giving star points now though really sticks out. Like geez, I ask, come on now, kill their uniqueness more please, I'm begging you. One of the more noticeable changes though is your ability to carry items will now explode in viability. In the OG, you've got 10 item slots to work with, alongside an unlockable 10 extra for 20 later through optional content. Now it's 15 by default and 20 after the fact as the same, essentially allowing for items to play a larger hand in the game, doubly so when the opportunity cost of getting them is a much more blurred line in this version. Helping in that coin economy is the buff to running feature. While it seemingly comes off as much easier to do, the buff takes a page from Sticker Star's book. Oh dear god no. Keeping those coins in your pocket, making running essentially riskless. And no, unlike Sticker Star, the enemies don't despawn, thank goodness. Leaving us with the last little notes here being the tattle check. While tattling is still a necessity in both versions of the game, needed to see the foe HP without the sacrifice of badge slots, while getting details on how each foe functions, the tattle check allows you to see that info again if you log it prior, without needing another turn with Goombella. Basically, just saving you time if the thing has been done before. But SMH man, just have the knowledge of all 130 plus enemies in the game memorized. It's not that hard. In terms of features, it was pretty good, and in terms of the game's adjustments, it's questionable, but usually better. Fellas though, y'all know what time it is. Yep, we're at the point where we get to plug all this nonsense of the game's experience with the replayability analysis. Holding forward right into the game's replayability aspects, things are quite good, and sadly where we'll begin to see a few cracks in this game's stellar foundation. Keeping things simple for now, we'll first look at the leveling system in that dreaded level curve, which is an oddball considering the game's context, as leveling itself really just is not a big deal in TTYD at all, as the game itself's not really that hard, doubly so when your partners actually have HP, and Super Guard can prevent you from taking any form of damage. They both add up to truly make the HP stat seem very irrelevant until late game. You know, this is with us ignoring the meme of pick BP on level up or you're wrong. The game's just wacky like that. But we need levels here, and we're gonna have to make assumptions. Plenty considering how the game can be approached. So we're gonna assume you're doing a regular run of the game. Odds are you'll just end the game with at least the green stage for some low level 20s action. If, and yes I had to test this unrealistic scenario, where you battle every single unique enemy spawn in the game, crawling into every corner, hitting a single bullet bill per cannon, the quiz enemy fails, atomic boo, every moon cleft, wins on the losable first Bowser and second Iron Clef fights, but no D-ranking for these bozos, alongside no pit runs, minus how much this accidental enemy respawn added, we will reach the final boss with every enemy beat at level 27, which sadly still fails to get us that final stage upgrade, which is sadly our issue here. Without a detour, you're not realistically getting that stage for 200, weirdly leaving this piece of progression out of reach for the main game. Assuming you do the optimal strat of funneling every single level into BP, the badge system is far less restrictive this time, as badges previously were very finite in how many you could get. This time, however, plenty of them were farmable. While a minimum of one copy can be found each, for the most part, others can be generated further. As in battle, you can steal badges that appear with the game's optional partner, others can be farmed from gambling, and worst of all, being the potential drops after battle, with horrible gambling rates, a massive time test that'll involve the house winning every time. No, you're not getting that flower finder drop. Meanwhile, you're sitting there hoping to see at least a single drop in this manner across the whole run of a game. Needless to say, this all inevitably adds more options to your badge loadout to cover as many grounds as you want, helping make the game far more replayable through encouraging very thoughtfully made kits. And oh boy, he loaded up on power rushes. Bro, it's just a Goomba, chill out! Anyways, partner leveling works similar to the previous game, but a bit different now. Where previously you needed a block to do so, now you've got to gather 3 shine sprites in the overworld, then cash them in for a level back in the hub. The thing making it more well thought out, but not really this time, is the fact that you otherwise have to backtrack to capitalize on the boosts as early as possible, meaning 3 entire chapters will lock you out of the feature because you can't backtrack at all. The not well thought out part of it is the random side quest you gotta go all the way back to chapter 1 territory for, but this time chapter 5 is beat, so it's fine. To get Thing and cash it out for the Ultra Stone and those second waves of improvements. To get that aforementioned HP, extra attacks, and of course more damage. Alongside this, we have a bit of a returning but not really feature where Shet Rippo can shuffle around shine sprite levels that nobody will ever use, or Mario's own levels for a small fee. And Mario's HP's at 5, now let the Goomba live, my guy! As far as levels are concerned, outside of the questionable handling of the Ultra ranks, it's a non-issue where grinding never really matters and is entirely optional. Anyways, Mr. Getter, where's the backtracking rant? This is the only negative thing anyone has to say about the OG after all. Well, lucky you. It's time for a glimpse into that. So first, we gotta tag along with the game's progression loop to find the issues lurking around. But essentially, the prologue throws us into town to immediately find things, but more importantly is the fact the game throws 3 entire tutorials at you, for action command, star power, and badge equipping respectively. But unlike my Pokemon playing audience would be familiar with due to them skipping Sword and Shield, all of these are actually skippable. Yes, the game actually respects your time by allowing noobs and button mashers to partake in them to learn and play with precision. Meanwhile, on replays, you can just pass in peace, obviously being a great boon for replay value. As far as chapter 1 is concerned, it's a massive straight line before backtracking through all that territory to get a second partner and reach the dungeon, getting the most broken badge in the game, although I could absolutely think of one that's far easier to exploit, alongside other nonsense all before the boss. Before snapping back to Mario gameplay with that Paper Mario 64 nonsense of running to town through areas you've already been through, but this time like the next 6, you've gotta go to the 1,000-year door. No way, that's the name of the game. In order to progress the story every single time without failure. Chapter 2 is mostly straight lines with 3 backtracking moments, one near the woods entrance, back to the house for a delivery, then of course coming back to the tree for the area's dungeon, which because it's a puzzle, I don't know if I can actually count these extra 2 trips for backtracking. Then we're given boss again. Chapter 3 hits us with a little in terms of prep time, but ultimately doesn't have much to talk about on your grind for the belt, only really having mentions with the constant in and out of the glitz pit alongside the mass amount of opponents you're going to be fighting. Anyways, you get your 4th partner, then not 1 but 2 boss fights way later. Chapter 4 is when the fangs of walking back and forth really begin to set in. This chapter is pretty straightforward in the first half. Talk to people a bit, leave town fetching 2 keys, return to cash them in, and then off to the dungeon you go. Inevitably beating the boss where running away from faux hell begins. With Act 2 of Chapter 4, the first thing you gotta do is run the full mile back to town, where you are likely not going to survive a fight, while needing to make a joke about this man's name every single time you go in and out of town. From here, partners given, and then all the way back to the creepy steeple you go. Again, dodging every single enemy. And armed with this, you go all the way back just to progress the plot. And you already know what sin is left. The trip back once again to actually move on from this hell. This fun hell where you were actually at least given no partner for a small amount of time. Chapter 5 begins with little bits of irk before finally getting in line with constant back and forths, backtracking alone for the Chuck-a-Cola, assuming you actually remember to grab the coconuts, backtracking for your final forced recruit, back again because Flavio, and of course back to the rock again. This section's frustration isn't just the enemies, but those 2 mandatory Yoshi jumps every time, which is an inevitable migraine. Regardless, the chapter ends smoothly, but chapter 6 starts by spitting directly into your left eye by asking you to do that godforsaken back and forth on Keel Hall key again! Anyways, chapter 6, backtracking but on a train. I'm not counting these, do it yourself, you're running back and forth a lot. Before getting stuck with a half-baked dungeon, some random Goombas, and a boss. And oh boy, there's chapter 7. Backtracking on the moon is whatever, nobody actually cares. Getting there, of course, has that ass-backwards General White quest, where you go from place to place on a haha fummy chase intended just to inflate game time. However, that's not as bad as the previous 2 nightmares long past. But that's fine, jackass, because optional content lets you do this again but differently. Anyways, leaving us with a pretty straightforward chapter 8 to finish the game on. This is true for both versions of the game. However, the remaster decided to save the day with some of the prior world tweaking. The changes in question completely killed backtracking for the last stand HP badge in Hooktail Castle. Lessening the blow of the backtracking in Chapter 4, we get a new pipe between the creepy steeple and a house in Twilight Town, alongside the ability to consent to Duplus's dumped game from the second moment onward. Chapter 5's just really annoying partner swap bait is rectified with the spring for repeated run-ins with the area. Although they sadly did fix this Flower Fuzzy's movement pattern, so he's not going to get stuck anymore. Chapter 6 isn't really fixed, but taking the train after beating the chapter does allow you to skip past the Riverside Station detour and go straight to your destination, alongside that massive overhaul to the fast travel pipes, making the travel around all the chapter areas much more tolerable, especially Glitzville, alongside making General White's intakes a non-issue. Although there's 2 new force battles in the game. One force tutorial just because you don't know what defense does. It's very important that they tell you right before the cleft fights. And something that actually does not need to be here at all. Ignoring that though, our progression bettering is more than enough of an edge in the remaster's favor. But as far as replayability is concerned, one thing interrupting that seamless loop is the chapter intermissions, where you have to play as someone else. Sometimes they're fine as it's basically just text, but when you have to do stuff, it can be quite annoying, especially on repeats, although it's honestly just post chapter 5's potion making. Bro, just let it end already. These time sections, even if brief, are just not fun. But Peach having moments of her own ain't all, because now Bowser has them too. The only difference here is instead of random gameplay bits, his are a bit more consistent, either just talking or for some reason beyond our comprehension, partake in a platformer that's a complete non-challenge and ends prematurely for no reason at all. Good lord, why do these even exist? Let's hope to God they never make a game based off these sections. Look, if anyone ever dies on these stages, just sit there and judge them silently. They earned it. Except me, this one was on purpose. Nobody's ever taken a death before now. With our progression on the table, that finally leaves us to season the stake with what critical issues may or may not exist with bosses. So first, quick mentions of the non-issues, because their fights are also well crafted without issue. These, I would argue, flawless fights would include both versions of Magnus, Lord Crump I guess, Rockhawk, Macho Grubba, Atomic Boo, the Dupless fights, as much as the first one can be underwhelming, it works for plot. Bowser 1, despite being a victim to the same debacle, minus the plot relevance. Both Shadow Siren fights. The Shadow Queen, minus some Phase 2 weirdness. The blooper, but honestly this could go either way. Yes, even the Gold Fuzzy, alongside Gloomtail, are all pretty damn good with no issues in sight. With issues in mind, the Iron Clefts are the go-to because only a single attack can damage them in the entire game, with nothing you can get afterwards being useful for rematches. Both Bones bosses and the Smorg massively struggle from how easily dispatched they are from AoE attacks, turning otherwise interesting battles into complete nothing fests. Cortez would be fine if the 3-phase boss with 20 HP each didn't randomly have a weak point specifically only on one phase. Like, bro melts before you can really abuse it. Gus simply exists and is completely outclassed by an enemy later in the game, with that enemy being fought during Chapter 3 and the Pit of 100 Trials, making Gus himself feel far less valuable because of how quickly and frequently he gets rebattled, but in this other form. Hooktail actually has a positive, as the entire gimmick is pulling up with a badge for the boss's weakness, essentially turning the fight into easy mode. Without it, you're essentially stuck having one of the minuscule amount of battles that could be deemed hard in the entire game. With the battle made even better considering Phase 2 does not have an audience to help assist you with special moves. Bonetail falling victim to an annoying quirk that was an issue in Paper Mario 64, just that nonsensical instant heal to drag the fight out longer, and that ignores the nuances of multi-phase healing, which leaves us with the last boss fights of relevance. First with Grotus, because honestly he just does not have enough HP. That's really it. Otherwise it's a good fight. But the fact we're even mentioning it at all mainly is because it's a part of a back-to-back with Bowser 2. This is some peak fiction, which this battle is greatly improved upon through tasteful usage of instant healing, something you're probably going to be in dire need of at the start of the fight. Finally, leaving us with the remaster's exclusive bosses. They hit really hard, you are probably going to die, and unless you have massive damage output, it's going to be a struggle, making for some great endgame challenge, both of which can be rebattled infinitely if you please. On the boss offerings, there's really not that many misses, especially when the recruited partners from the associated chapters don't completely steamroll their associated bosses. The closest thing we have to that is maybe Flurry's ability to blow away the fist. That's it. Which all this does to leave us with optional bosses. We got 3 in the original and 5 in the remaster. They can be battled as early as the prologue, Chapter 1 through Intended Means, and Chapter 4, or even later, delayed to your earliest player's convenience, with the remaster's bosses early as post-Chapter 3 and post-Chapter 5, with the 3 super bosses all particularly balanced in favor of post-game content. But of course, you can do them whenever you want, so you know you're going to take that gamble way sooner than you should. One optional boss at least, opening up more enemies to deal with. Cool, that's all. In terms of replayability, the game's packing it for 5,000 points and the whole lobby's fuming. Outside of the backtracking issues, there's really not much holding the games back when it starts free-falling through this little field called Peak. But we're nowhere near through this game yet. There are still more suckies to give out, a shock to absolutely nobody. Tornado jump rolling our way right into the features, we have content again. Shocker. But first, the stuff people don't care about. Item shops, yeah. You can once again sell items for monies, access an item storage in order to deposit and withdraw items whenever you need them, but differently here is buying the items. While you're still forfeiting your coins for goodies, the up is the free shop points that you will get with every single purchase, which over time adds up to be a free item across a list that caps and resets at 300, at least rewarding you for shopping even more as if the items themselves weren't overkill enough. Gee, act surprised when I say this, but there's a badge shop in the game. This time, letting you buy any badge not currently on the shelves in stock, whenever you want to. You don't need to reload the area to do so, but the shelved items are discounted to at least incentivize buying them at that moment. Although that's not all, as you can sell badges now, obviously for bank, but if that's done, the game does allow you to buy them back from the shop later, always available, but for a bit of a steeper price. For more badge fetching related purposes, we once again have an unaltered star piece exchange for badges, giving this extra currency a single use case. Simulating reality with our next feature, for some reason, everyone is trying to stick their hands in Mario's pockets, because in a questionable decision-making moment, every inn and heal block in the game will now cost money. This world without free healthcare has the downside of leaving you potentially unable to ever use the otherwise very needed heal blocks. Calling it soft locking potential is absolutely misleading considering the game's lack of difficulty to farm coins from, but it's very questionable, and they knew very well. Cooking returns once again unlocked once Westside Rogueport is properly opened. Doing so might be bothersome to first-time players, but hey, that's not what we're caring about right now. You can again cook with an item to get something else, although with side content in mind, the 2-item cooking can be unlocked to get something far more useful. This time, however, a menu exists to track every single unique cooking item you can make in the game. It even gives you access to a recipe in order to recreate them, alongside fetching a few other recipes from the game's email thing that we won't talk about because it's irrelevant. While we're in the menu, we get to see a bit of a similar menu to that of the recipe book with the badge list, which is essentially the same thing but for badges. I mean, come on now. But more importantly, the tattle log, which gives you an entire index to track every single enemy in the game, where they're from, alongside their tattle info in case you felt like filling the whole thing up because running peekaboo was just too much work. As some enemies can only be battled a limited number of times, their tattles can be missed, but that is nothing more than a hypothetical, as of course those lost logs are just chilling in a trash can. Cool, those are our normal whatever kind of features. So now we get to the actual content stuff. First being the Trouble Center, essentially a hub with a massive load of side quests to partake in, with the list expanding as you progress the game. Sadly, being the only source of true post-game. The only drawbacks really being that you can only take one quest at a time, and to switch missions, you'll either have to beat one or cough up some money to bail yourself out. The actual issues, if any, come down to how much the useful stuff will just be hidden among the muck, as here's how you get the game's 7th partner with a massive detour up Hooktail Castle. You even get the cooking upgrade here, which you can thankfully save time on during Chapter 4. And more importantly, this is where the Pianta Parlor cards are, which sadly have no hint as to which missions have them unless you play the remaster, where they'll at least tell you where these rewards are before locking in. But more on those cards in due time. Next, we have the holy grail of optional content being the Pit of 100 Trials. This misleading dungeon is a gauntlet where you have to endure an onslaught of 91 battles, with limited healing against stretches of 9 enemies before one rest, with a prize in the all-important exit. Refusing to leave, of course, gives you stronger enemies and the constant fear of failure, before a messiah shows up with the ability to simply pull you out of the dungeon or send you even further beyond. But you're one smart cookie who understands that using the mover is the opposite of hype and a cardinal sin. All on your descent to the bottom to fight the OG game's only super boss, to be rewarded handsomely with a single star point. The Glitz Pit's in a weird spot as a feature because it's what the entirety of Chapter 3 is built upon. But here, you're a ranked fighter and you're gunning for the champ's belt. The only way to do so is to win. technical winnings not all, as we get randomly selected fight conditions as the gate between you and the next foe. These restrictions help break up the sheer repetitiveness of the 20 foes you'll be up against, while also enabling you to think outside the box more to meet those demands, while of course coming out on top. It's cool, but like, why the hell is the post-chapter 3 version of this the exact same? There's like no reason to ever repeat it. And I mean, similar to the original game, there's this one feature, the curse, charm. Why can't these games ever have consistency, man? The thing Merely sells you, where like the previous game, it's just a buy-in for random effects to help the game go dummy easy mode, if you remember the feature even exists in the first place. Moving on, we go right back onto those very thrilling cards. The Pianta Parlor is undoubtedly the best part of the game. With the power of a middleman currency, we get to gamble, baby. Slot machines for days. Sparkle till silver can eat its heart out. The tokens you earned are obviously able to be cashed out for rewards of an endless supply of goodies, although this is where the parlor cards finally kick in, as they allow for a greater variety of items or badges. And you're all loaded up on power rushes, aren't you? Leave the Gloomba alone, please. He's sad enough as is. But that's only one piece of the puzzle, as the cards also open up access to 4 different mini games to partake in to increase your numbers, at a risky cost of a buy-in price. This version of the paper game is so dumb baby easy that it's essentially free tokens. The games for both the tube and boat serve as safe, silly platforming sections. Meanwhile, the playing game is just a gamble, probably the hardest one and easily the most skippable. Your best performances are kept on the leaderboards to be forever immortalized, to rub salt in the wound of future pitiful attempts. Our next feature is another paradise for gamblers, the Happy Lucky Lottery. Essentially, you pay for a lottery ticket and every day you can try your luck for matching numbers for some sweet rewards. That's it. Which finally leaves us with fortune telling. Essentially, in the sewers, you've got this house where you can pay up some monies to learn what your current goal is, which is completely useless in the remaster, as well as hints to find where star pieces and shine sprites will be, with the former being the most valuable for obvious reasons, although just having the game knowledge would also suffice. Regardless, that's it for the features, but good lord, it's not even close yet because of course the remaster is trying to hold me hostage here to keep going. In order to attempt to add the flair of a remake into TTYD, our HD experience changes a lot in regards to side content and the 100%ing process. But who cares about any of that? Well, we can first focus on this version's biggest fumble. That first is the edits to the dialogue. While the game's otherwise perfect script may have had oil dumped on it, washing out a bit of the charm it previously had, you know, despite some obvious upgrades, that is unfortunately outside the scope of this video. However, what we are here for is the failure of the text boxes themselves. As with the original game, the text boxes progressed at a decent speed. Not bad for a first time run, however, with repeat runs, we had the blessing that was just mashing B for outlandishly fast text speeds. However, in this definitive edition here, these speeds only exist on repeat dialogue that does not persist through multiple save files, meaning every other bit of dialogue is as slow as the effects of global warming. This plague unfortunately ends up bringing the game to a halt in ways that I couldn't think was possible, and this is coming from somebody who likes the Gen 7 Pokemon games. It's a massive turnoff for any repeat runs of the game, only really working in the course in the context of a first timer, which is an issue because a game like this does naturally succeed in being replayable. Now just being a massive drag because of how naturally slow the text is, because you can't effectively mash B through it or like do anything. Something my first run of the game involved me complaining about far too early into the prologue because of how blatant the issue is. Oh, but don't worry, Buttercup, that's not the only dialogue shortcoming, as the goated feature that was being able to look back through text was thrown out and stepped on as a mere afterthought. Despite being a positive inclusion with the OG, don't worry, as we got more general slowness dragging this version down as well as the tutorials, but we're specifically looking at the ones for the partners and the curses, as these ones are much longer, are actually very interactive this time versus being glorified cutscenes, at least allowing you to learn the abilities much easier at the cost of your very limited lifespan. It's not all negative though. If you're bad at the game, text repeated courtesy of death can actually be skipped in order to get you back into the action sooner. Hell yeah, that's great. That might just be one of this version's best changes alone. So yeah, that's it for text. One good and plenty bad. Let's get into the actual part 2 of the features. You know, the part this section was entirely supposed to be about. Starting that off is going to be the Battle Master. This guy lurking around every world exists to help give you some info which nobody really cares about, or the actual feature being a battleground to test action commands on. While very useful for helping you learn your offensive action command times, since FP is now a non-issue, it drops the ball with the important side of things being being the defensive action commands, as you're only really guarding against the goon boards, which is an enemy that doesn't even appear in actual gameplay. This is damn near useless to learn guard and, more importantly, super guard timings for, since it's not against enemies that actually matter. Something like the Shady Koopa knockdown attack, a wizard's tickle sesh, half the final boss's attacks, or various other threats. Instead, it's wasted on nothing. In terms of new content added to the gameplay loop, we have a few. So first is badges. 2 new badges are added to the game, both of which we will come back to later. But it's not all secrets here, as the badge shop was actually updated to now add mist badges to its lineup should you not collect them if a foe drops them, or if you're somehow at the badge cap, so they can at least get put into the shop's rotation for you to buy later, ensuring they don't disappear to the ether. Cooking recipes come back to add a single new item, otherwise unchanged. Then we're left back with the tattle log, with new entries for the new enemies alongside newly added absent foes. That doesn't matter, as the log itself has 2 new goodies going for it. Firstly, the game doesn't spoil future locations when tattling foes anymore. Whereas the previous version was prone to doing so, now tattling ties the listed location to wherever that first tattle is performed. The impact it makes doesn't really matter, but now there's a chance you won't know moonclefts actually live on the moon. The more important change for the tattle log is the separation of tattle entries between a boss and the rematch encounter. So among those 5 enemies, you'll actually lose the privilege of their HP being visible at the start of their rematch fight, alongside the Shadow Queen's final phase. Finding a way to make those battles less unique by scrapping their only real advantage above the rest. And another means of altering the experience, this time, the ruination of the game's economy. The most notable change here is the coin cap being a 4-digit number now, rather than the 3 of before. While it doesn't change too much on its own, reaching said numbers is far too easy now. High rewards from the Glitz Pit help it, considering it's forced content in the main game, but now we have this little thing called a clear bonus. Essentially, with bosses and some of the fights in the Pit of 100 Trials as well, you will get free cash just for winning, and noticeable amounts of it too, where it will add up pretty quickly. And much like in real life, do you know what happens when so much money is injected straight into the economy? Yep, inflation. A balancing act like this has to exist, and as a result, Charlie-Tin proceeds to price hike all his goods, and new shops move in on Keelhaul Key in the Boggly Woods, this time refusing to buy your items almost like it's a reference, because they too want your money. And even the Pianta Parlor finally realized you would sell your kidneys for a single copy of Power Rush, so now these goods are more expensive. The main upside being that you can now 100% the collectibles much easier now, since not that much across the entire game actively have their prices inflated, meaning selling badges in general just feels a lot less needed. There's really not that much to say on it, it's just more coinage. Since the Pianta Parlor just came up, we may as well mention the main change now. The death of the slot machines. Yeah, since Nintendo is still in their soy arc, the hype game got cancelled, and now for some fan service, they brought back the Spade game for Mario Bros. 3 with a TTYD skin on top of it. Yeah, that's pretty hype. Basically the same thing, but sure. Realistically, you're still buying tokens anyway, so we'll just pretend this is nothing at all. Well, at least they rebalanced the paper game, so it's not just a complete breeze and a little bit more of a challenge. Next is something we completely ignored in the last section because of its lack of relevance. This is the crane game. After a minor detour that is turning it on, you press a button and then press another, hoping you lined it up properly. This time though, the game has a much more slippery crane, being very reminiscent to those crane machines you've seen in real life. The only reason it's even being mentioned at all is because the post-game opens up further rewards once a board has been cleared, up to multiple times. Cool, nobody's gonna use it, but cool. Moving on, the Pit of 100 Trials even gets a few minor tricks up its sleeve now, as in general, dying was reworked quite a bit. We already saw the dialogue skip thing, and that's actually not the only thing related to death, as now you can continue directly from the room you fall in. This would also happen to apply to the pit itself, completely ignoring the weight of failure entirely, kind of defeating the purpose of this being a very punishing gauntlet where defeat had a heavy price and victory had that very satisfying feeling. Thankfully, if you've beaten it already and want to go for the super boss frag as well, potentially knocking out a post-game trouble, you're now able to use a special mover to send yourself straight to floor 50, cutting out on a lot of the filler up to this point. But Mister, is taking this guy's shady deal worth it? Yes, it's worth it. Regardless, if you made the local wacko population go extinct from giving it extensive brain damage over a long course of time, you will get access to this ROM hack feeling super boss to at least allow there to be a final challenge at the end, once the actual final challenge has been handled. The Glitz Pit comes back once again to get more meat on its bone. Firstly, the fight conditions actually show up in battle now being a colossal W that will not punish you for simply not paying attention, as if the snail's pace text wasn't doing that enough already. The ranking system is a bit different now as well, mainly because losing, not that you would, will no longer de-rank you back to irrelevancy, making both the main game attempt and the post-chapter 3 rerun a straight line to success. Finally, coming back once the champ's belt is gone again. Exhibition matches are a feature added in here, letting you do restriction frictionless battles against any member of the Glitz Pit depending on your rank. And that's it! Okay, it's untrue, as with some trouble setup, you can use this to battle the other new super boss that for some reason is much harder than the other one. An actual new addition around these parts will be the Boo quizzes. Bro, it's just quizzes. I really don't know how you want me to say it. Beating the final quiz will actually give you a money badge, which is great, although it's still a shame that getting all the badges will require you to get parlor tokens, because duh, there's no refund anywhere. Thankfully, all that's left now is our 100% completion grind, despite how vague 100% is. Cracking open that cold one starts with the notes page, as the hints you get from fortune telling will actually be tracked in a menu, no longer able to be paid for once you've gotten it a single time, making those remaining shine sprites and star pieces even easier to find, as if the updated map screen wasn't already doing that, since this now tracks those two collectibles for each area, so you will know where stuff is missing to quickly correct that issue. Notes page can also store the info from this bozo in the Trouble Center for some missions that you'll be able to pay up some gold for to get a hint on what to do, softening up the grind that the Trouble Center can sometimes be, although not every trouble has one. In our menus, we actually get access to new unlockables with art and music galleries. Through gathering those map found collectibles, you'll be able to browse new items, whichever gallery they're associated with. The concept art gallery just being a neat look, while the music gallery is everything the Sticker Star Jukebox wishes it was, because it's just a music box with all the game's music on it, plus the entire GameCube soundtrack if available, which is perfect to listen to as Nintendo sits around and DMCAs everyone that re-uploads the game's soundtrack. But those are just menu features. Where's our big cool thing for 100% completion at, man? Well, for that, we gotta tattle every enemy, register every cooking item, now made easier by cooked items obtained outside of cooking actually counting as progress despite you not making them yourself, and of course getting every single badge. All of these mixed together in a reward picked up at the noose, being another badge, but now you're wearing a golden skin. And it's been taken off. Why 100% is weird in this game is because you don't need every key item nor every trouble done either. But hey, 100% is at least measurable by some standards now. The OG game couldn't even do that, which is where we wrap up the features. While there may be other changes that we've gone completely unmentioned, the relevance doesn't hold up nearly as much as everything covered here. Regardless, we shove off once again to sprint towards that finish line because I'm getting some bad flashbacks to the PMD1 video and I need out. Moving towards our average eye-rolling session, we'll begin with the GameCube version. Audibly speaking, the game's got a pretty solid soundtrack. It's just right, being enjoyable from start to finish with goodies throughout. Visually speaking, on the other hand, for a GameCube game, it's held up exceptionally well. Genuinely a timeless art style that, frankly put, really did not need a makeover. Seriously, with this game, it would have been just fine with a port job. The idea of a graphical overhaul was completely unnecessary, which, oh boy, it's the remaster, and it's much more complicated than just a clean sweep. With audio first, the game's sound effects on average are much weaker in terms of impact. From super guards to the muting of the roars and death of the crowd, the sounds of whatever the shadowy stuff is, the 1,000-year door noises, your typical explosions, among much more, just suffer from a general worsening of impact or sheer vibes. Drowning out each and every step such moments have, yeah sure, others are better, but on average what has changed leans less in favor of worsening. The music itself though is in a weird spot, as the lineup of tracks in the game actually multiplies to a notable extent. But the most importantly is the standard battle music will actually be different between chapter areas and stomping the repetition of one battle track right into its grave. While new tracks exist, sadly old ones got remixed pretty heavily, so much in fact that they can suffer from a bit of an identity loss. The Glitzville chapter bosses stick out much more in this regard, nowhere hitting a similar vibe at all, but usually things are pretty good, helping the reskinned game have a much stronger identity by not being a simple copy and paste, which is good in itself. But my Heart Gold and Soul Silver enjoyers, where are you at? Because like those games, a badge exists here to bring back that GameCube soundtrack in most of its former glory, with the main drawback being just the fact you don't start with it. Sadly, I say most of because the original tracks for this version will actually seep their way in regardless, meaning the GameCube nostalgia isn't so authentic, but still a decent enough approach to be enjoyable. Plus, hey, completely off topic, but who doesn't love that gimmick letting the overworld music persist into the battles in the Palace of Shadow? That's cool. Games need to do that more with their final areas, man, I swear. Which pivots us towards the new graphics, and god dang, they got this one down so damn well. The paper characters look fantastic. Sure, they have that unnecessary paper outline, but it's so unnoticeable and that dark actually looks great on the characters. In terms of your party, Mario isn't the only one with a back sprite now, but particularly the crew is just so much more expressive. That's before looking at stuff like the NPCs and enemies as well, making the landscape look great with its newfound papery look, with the real drawbacks being definitely the cursed chest areas and sometimes the water water texture, but not always. I don't know, maybe the floors are a little reflective. It just leaves the only real bad thing to be the redesigned crystal stars. I'm sorry, this just does not look good. Like, we can throw the game's 30 FPS out the damn window. Turning these beautiful little rock things into whatever this is hurts more than anything else. One thing that exists now that is at least worth mentioning is in battle, as for whatever reason, the game gives you visual indicators for statuses and the such, even when they don't actually activate. The failures being visible just ends up as clutter that could potentially lead into the illusion of something that isn't even there. Oh, but that's irrelevant when slowness comes back from counting your star power. Why does it have to sit here and hold me hostage while it counts every single point? Just so the foe can have their action. Anyways, charging's updated. You can see your charge level now. Cool. Which finally leaves us with the controls being a little bit bad. The issue isn't the button layouts, but rather just how unresponsive the controls can be at times. Usually seen with platforming, or more importantly, attempting to do any kind of menuing in battle. Sometimes your inputs just get eaten and you have to simply deal with it. I love it when this makes the game worse arbitrarily. Anyways, minus a few minor shortcomings, this section is a massive W, inching us ever closer to sending the game out on a good note. Oh goody, the story. Finally, another ground in which TTYD is just above and beyond Paper Mario 64. Inarguably so. But like any Mario game, you can essentially already imagine what we'll see. So, starting us off is the intro cutscene that's actually completely skippable in the original, but a forced watch only once in the remaster. Essentially, Peach arrives in a Rogueport for a vacation, where she ends up getting her hands on a map that only she could get access to. Because duh, plot. And promptly mails it off to Mario before getting kidnapped off screen. Come on man, it's her specialty. Now, our adventure begins with Mario receiving the map and leaving Luigi by himself once again, ending up in the same rundown shithole. Complications arise immediately, just as a fun and warm introduction to the new world. Before Mario's new companion gets kissy with him, the two see Toadsworth, who's only ever seen again in the credits, and then actually meets with the professor in order to find a really old door. And while doing so, you learn that the map is actually magic, updating in real time, where your new goal will be to find the crystal stars, but you're actually looking for Peach in Petal Meadows because apparently she went there. So finding her is the goal, but not actually. This cues up chapter 1, where Mario helps liberate the local grassland from a nearby dragon, and helps this Koopa get vengeance for his dead father, but oh wait, it's a Star Fox 64 spoiler, and now Mario's got the first crystal star and an unfathomable amount of Riz. Then the game cuts over to Peach and spoils her location being on the moon for the GameCube players. She's once again just relaying information to Mario, but now it's not really important for plot progression because the map kinda does that for him now. To summarize her chapter intermissions, Peach simply exists, and that's enough for the evil computer to fall in love with her, and then it goes on a whole character arc to learn about love or something. I don't know, Peach strokes his keyboard or something. It makes me uncomfortable. Look dude, she's captured, then her path converges with Mario's much later on in the story, when she's taken to fulfill her role. Cool, it's Bowser time. Bowser essentially serves as comic relief in this game, and is essentially always just one step behind Mario. His real breaking point in even going on his adventure was for the treasure, sure, but more importantly, that somebody stole his job of kidnapping Peach, which is where he draws the line, and then proceeds to do absolutely nothing until his path converges later. With our detours out of the way, Mario learns his next destination and is off to start a puny uprising from the invaders vandalizing their tree. So after walloping the purple people over some lost possession, Mario's showcasing his immense game and dispatching the local cross-knots, yeah, cross, not an X, look at the text on screen, the second star is gotten with the map pointing towards the sky. Mario has to get involved with the Mafia for a free blimp ticket through sorting out some family issues. He lives to see another day, and to the sky he goes. Here, the crew sees what looks like a crystal star on a belt and decides to sign their life away to a wrestling-like organization. Mario, of course, fights cleanly to the top as the paragon of good, hatching an egg that ends up as his new partner, one with a name that you can pick, which for some reason doesn't have name filters. Yes, even true for the remaster. A mystery begins to form with time during the latter half of the grind, with Speak of the Crystal Star and the Champ's Belt being a fate. This mystery turns into foul play as it turns out the fight promoter's been using the Crystal Star's power for his own good, a concept the game never tries to do again. He's been sucking fighters dry, and of course it's your turn to stop the strongest performance enhancing drug, and do so obviously, bringing this bozo back from the great beyond as now you're on your way. Chapter 4 has Mario going through a land covered in an unsettling vibe that's also cursing people to become pigs, so he just walks up and walks all over the monster, and just like that, he's off. Oh, so Mario's identity might have gotten stolen, but you can avoid identity theft thanks to this video's sponsor. In order to get through this identity crisis, Mario does what any sane individual would do. He teams up with one of those gloomy people who tried killing him earlier. Because yes, all of the women in the game are his. Vivian talks about birds immediately for no reason at all because she's just lost it. You develop slight interest in fossil fuels. The P is gotten, and oh boy, it's time to undo the Uno reverse card. After the breakup and reverse breakup, of course. Cool, 4 stars down, and it's time for Mario to get shipwrecked. Only after bringing a man out from retirement to join his wife in the afterlife. Somehow surviving, Mario's gotta fight some ghost pirates, and the day is saved. Until the Crossnuts come back as pirates, but the power of bartering is just too strong and they're driven away. The bartering in question was violence. The 6th star is only a simple train ride away, only after hearing I love you 100 whole times. But this time, it's a race against the clock, but simple becomes not when the train deals with simple theft, an even simpler deduction, a ghost exorcism, oh wait, never mind, alongside a personalized death trap plan, dealing with a bridge that won't go down, and putting an end to the full train takeover and abduction of whatever the hell these things are, just to show up late to the tourist attraction in oh god, oh no. But it didn't matter because those bozos took a fake crystal star. Mario's going up 6-1 in the final act. This time, the map's sending you to the moon, and you already know there's gonna be an easy way there. No, not a teleporter, silly, but a capital M, capital massive cannon. Despite oxygen not being a thing in space, that's no issue for Mario, at least at this point in the timeline, which leads him to the terrorist base, where he steals their goodies, but most importantly their star, where Mario says farewell to the horny computer. It opens the door through the power of magic, where he fights his way through hell and back, punishing the ghost people and tearing a warpath to the Crossnut leader. Wail on him because it's Mario, but get cutscened otherwise the princess dies. But Bowser at least buys her more time alive as he tries to beat Mario a second time, and fails because he's still Bowser. Yeah, I don't know why he shows up in Glitzville and then shows up a second time. It made no sense. Where now, Peach gets hoisted off and into the final room is sacrificed as a vessel for a very old demon that unfortunately Mario's Riz alone cannot stop. Oh yeah, Grotus dies because of course he does. And the final battle starts. You're winning, but now it's impossible. And then through quite literally the power of the friends we made along the way, yes, every last one of them, I couldn't imagine dying and having to sit through this nonsense multiple times. This powers up the crystal stars. I think it's enough to actually save the day because yes, Mario gets to stop the big bad. Duh. Peach gets to live another day, and it's time to leave, where you finally realize you didn't even recruit Ms. Mouse. SMH. Mario's harem isn't even in full force. You're getting that non-canon ending. The two leave, and eventually you get the endings for your companions and foes, where complaining can finally begin, as Vivian just forgives her sisters, despite her entire character arc to be getting away from her abusive sister, which makes her entire story progression completely irrelevant by the end just from undoing it. Also, somehow Lord Crump coming back from space is stupid, and Grotus surviving as a head is stupid, and all these people not being evil anymore is stupid, because this game is allergic to this thing called consequences. Everyone has to have a happy ending, with everything else just being completely fine and not really noteworthy. With the main plot out of the way, we still got a bit more to shuffle through, as the partners actually do something the original game couldn't. They actually have personality, some of them have character arcs, but more importantly speak a lot more. Of course, we can slap on more of the game's random characters on that cake tower too, and most importantly, some of the side content courtesy of the Trouble Center. They really made the people feel like people, which pivots us to the world feeling like a world, because as if titles weren't enough, now there's some world lore being thrown on as well. You want some rumors about the Glitz Pit? You want a history lesson of Rogueport but 1,000 years ago? It's all there, man. God forbid you want some goofs, because Luigi has his own adventure that you get to hear from an unreliable narrator, that are some highly overdramatic and misleading books retelling his tale. Overall, for the game's story and general world building, it's a dub. In a negative, it's just another Mario Saves Peach story, but this time Bowser isn't the problem. Most of the chapters have their own self-contained stories, where some are obviously significantly better than others, all coming together in a fine overall plot, mainly succeeding in that moment-to-moment setting, keeping you on your toes through the many different experiences the game provides, you know, tapping into that childlike awe for first-timers or something. Which gamers, this is where the book will close to give the game the final send-off. Yes, gentlemen, the course will be cleared. Still one of the worst text changes ever cooked up. And at the end, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door is basically everything a game wants to be and more, all on top of being a perfect sequel. No matter how tiring and repetitive saying such can be, it quite literally took everything the first game did right, added a load of charm to it, and just kept the game's progression in the same flow with a new coat of paint to an absolute success. The gameplay is ripe with replayability out the wazoo, with its more robust and refined gameplay that does a great job at offering build diversity and having great reward for game knowledge. All with its nice defined look that truly keeps the game a leap ahead. Oh, before the plentiful side content, a somewhat immersive world, and of course a plot of grand interest. Fellas, I don't want to be that guy, but when it comes to giving the game a final score, it's actually gonna be our first 5-star game. And to avoid sounding like a broken record, the game's basically just positives outside of what exactly? The backtracking problems, maybe? Maybe the lack of direct post-game, considering most of the game's content's available during the main game's runtime? It's really not much, and the results speak for themselves. It's once again strength and simplicity, but even furthermore. In terms of asking, should you play the game? It's a yes. We're only putting one version of the game on here because yes, you should only really play one of them, because it's just the same game, but again, both have their drawbacks of varying extremes that make it hard though to pick one over the other, which says a lot when one of them actually has more content. Now, for my opinion, the reason we're all here, of course, and I gotta say, with both versions of the game around, the original just feels more appealing, man. It's literally just the remaster's text speed. I can't get into the gameplay when this nonsense holds me back. Text speed aside, good game, worth it. And fellas, that's it. That's your deep dive into what Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is. And because YouTube already had me at my knees begging earlier, leave a comment. Anyways, thank you for watching, and until next time. Wait, shit, all my TTYD footage was messed up. The GameCube footage was supposed to be a 4:3, not 16:9. Well, it's time to throw it all in the trash and start over. Whoopsies.